And what they're positioning themselves as is what we've just been saying, as like potentially the go-to company out of the box company. Welcome back, everyone. It's Mindshift episode 16, and it's our first episode of 2021. Can't believe 2020 is actually done, and we're well into February already. So yeah, it's so good to be back, sitting here with the one, the only Jonty. We're back for a two-man episode today. I hope you are all doing well in these times. Today we are doing one of our carrying on from one of our other series that we started last year, breaking down another business strategy sessions, as we coined them last year. Today we'll be breaking down Stripe. For those of you who don't know who they are, we will be diving into more, and basically, just as a sort of loose introduction, if you are someone who's bought something through Amazon's website or subscribed to Spotify, you've paid through Stripe's platform, probably without even knowing it, because their integration is so seamless with these online websites. So we'll be breaking down that business. So super exciting company. The payments and the online payment sort of space is a super exciting space, and it's always changing. It's also very complex. So just bear with us this episode. It's taken us quite a while to wrap our heads around this. And also just a disclaimer from the outset, everything that we do say in this episode is, and everything we do say about Stripe is an opinion. It's not investing advice. It's just for entertainment purposes, basically. So how we're going to kick this episode off is I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Jonty, and he is going to basically sort of set the scene. Obviously, I'm going to chime in as well, but I think he's more of an expert in this based on his research.
Yeah, I wouldn't say expert.
No, but he's basically just going to sort of set the scene with the global payments ecosystem, how it works. Obviously, we have many different characters that come into this sort of ecosystem. You have banks, you have MasterCard, Visa, payment gateways, payment processors, Stripe being a payment processor / gateway. You have merchants, you have acquirers, issuers, lots of terminology, lots of characters, and it can become quite a convoluted system. This is why it took us quite a while to wrap our heads around it. But yeah, so let's dive straight into it. Jonty, would you like to set the scene? How does the payment system work? What is the flow of fees? Because obviously that's where Stripe earns their money, and then where does Stripe fit in and all of that?
Yeah, so I mean, just on Stripe, we were super excited to learn about this company, and I think for me, when Luca suggested looking at Stripe, I wanted to really understand how this payment network actually operates. So it's very complex, as Luca said, and so yeah, it took a while to wrap my head around that. But essentially, what they refer to is the four-party payment system, and so there's essentially four main parties that I'll break down. So you get the merchant, and the merchant is essentially the online company or the company selling to a customer. So in this example, it would be Spotify that Luca mentioned, or say Amazon. They would be known as the merchant.
On the merchant also,
yeah,
where there's a lot of layering as well. Sorry to just jump in. Is that like the merchant then, for say for instance, you're thinking about someone like Shopify, who obviously has merchants. Like the merchant then is the customer of Shopify, who has their own business running on Shopify's platform, right?
Yeah. So as I understand it, yeah, I'm not 100% sure on Shopify exactly, but it would essentially be the business in this case selling the products. So that it would make sense probably in that situation.
Yeah.
So then you obviously get the card holder. That would be me and you, the ordinary people who are buying whatever we want from say from Amazon or our subscription to Spotify. You then get the card issuer. So this would be the bank account of the customer who has the credit card / debit card. So a bank would issue you a credit card, and that's why they're known as the card issuer. You then get the merchant acquirer. So the merchant acquirer is the merchant's bank account. And so they're essentially, the merchant's bank. So that's pretty simple to understand.
And because
Now,
they're acquiring, they're acquiring funds from the issuer's bank, right? So that's why they're called the acquirer,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So now where things start getting a little bit more interesting is I guess the back end systems between all of these players. So we all know about MasterCard and Visa. So these are known as the card networks, and essentially these operate between the card issuer and the merchant acquirer. So the two banks, they're essentially like the railroads between these two banks, and they transmit the information between each of the banks. And so what's quite interesting about those businesses is they're getting a fee on every single payment that's going through at any point in time in the world. And like Visa, I think, has over 50% market share. MasterCard's more around 30%. Then you get, I think, Discover and American Express as well. And so, like,
And
just
also,
think how
Jonty,
many payments.
yeah, it's crazy. Like I was about to say, just to throw out a statistic for everyone listening, is like, just so you can understand the scale. Isn't it true that they process, Visa and Mastercard, I don't know if it's collectively or each, that they process something like 1 million payments per second, right?
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean,
Or it could
so
even be like 50 million.
the terminology they like to use is gross payment volume. So that would be the sales volume of, or the dollar or whatever currency amount is actually going through these networks. So Visa and MasterCard take a small percentage. So I mean, they're essentially getting that fee on all of that gross payment volume. It must be outrageous. Okay, so that's one of the back end systems known as the card networks between the merchant acquirer and the card issuer. And then between the merchant and the merchant acquirer is what we get, or what we call the independent sales organization. So this refers to point of sale systems, payment gateways, etc. And this is where Stripe falls. So they essentially are the payment gateway, and they essentially transmit information between the merchant and the merchant acquirer. And so essentially how an example would work. So I'm just going to like briefly take you through how the whole, like, a payment would actually work. So the first step is that there has to be this authorization. So the cardholder's information and transaction details are transmitted by the payment gateway to the merchant acquirer. From there, the information is transmitted via the card network, e.g. Visa/MasterCard, to the cardholder's issuing bank for approval. The card issuer's response, so the bank, being the issuing bank or the card issuer, then has to approve the transaction. Is this a valid card, valid person, do they exist, etc. And that's then approved or denied, and then transmitted back to the merchant acquirer, being the bank account of the merchant. And then this is once again relayed back via the payment gateway to the merchant. And so this is, I think, from here, this is where I think it differs slightly depending on the currency, depending on the payment gateway. But in my research, I came across basically where they said that each business day, the merchant would send a batch of approved payments to the merchant acquirer, and then the merchant acquirer will deposit funds based on those sales into the merchant's account via an automated clearinghouse. So that automated clearinghouse in South Africa would be something like BankServe. And then essentially it debits the merchant's account for processing fees. So they're making a small fee there as well. Then it says that the card networks debit the issuing bank's account, obviously with the amount, and credits the merchant acquirer's account for the net amount. And so this would be the gross receipt less interchange and card network fees. So this is another terminology now we have to get out the way, is the interchange fee. And this is a fee but from the merchant bank to the issuing bank. And so the issuing bank gets this fee, and most of it because they take on that risk of issuing the card, and all the costs that go along with that, such as like advertising, loyalty programs, I think. But essentially, they're getting compensated for the risk of issuing the credit card.
Also, that interchange fee exists between the acquirer and issuer bank, because so that the balance of acquirers and issuers is kept in balance. The amount, because obviously all of the fees are actually, if you think about it, without interchange, are actually flowing all the way to the acquirer, i.e., the merchant's bank account, the business's bank account. And then you think to yourself, oh well, without interchange, the customer's bank isn't actually getting anything out of this transaction. So
Yeah,
the
they get a
interchange
small
is,
amount.
yeah, the interchange is there to sort of motivate more banks, and give some incentive to banks to actually issue cards. Otherwise, everyone would just be acquirer banks, and the whole system would break, basically.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, that's basically kind of uh, the example, or most of the process. And so now, just to like kind of give you an idea of those fees within there, I just want to sum it up with a little example. So essentially, there's something that's called the merchant discount, and so this is the net fee essentially, or the total fee that the merchant will pay for having this online payment facilitated. And so this is a payment, say, that Stripe would pay. So they charge generally 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction. So as you can imagine, that's quite a hefty fee, right? And shame the merchants have to basically pay a lot of money just to be able to accept payments. What makes up that merchant discount is a few fees, and we spoke about the various players in there, but essentially there's the interchange fee that goes to the card issuer. Now that's the bulk of the fee. Then there's the card network fee, which is it's not nearly as large as the interchange fee. And then what you're left with is what we call the markup. And so some markup goes to the acquiring bank, and another markup goes to the independent sales organization, e.g., Stripe. And so, interestingly, when I was researching, is the fee that's left over is essentially what Stripe can take. So where interchange fees are high, they can actually make losses in some situations. But apparently, it says where debit cards are used, and interchange fees are low, then they can make large margins on those transactions, which is quite interesting.
So basically, that's sort of the scene being set. Thanks, Jonty. We appreciate it's very sort of convoluted, very complex. Hopefully, it sort of clears up, as we do more research, and if you are interested in the space, I urge you to do your own research and sort of understand. It's a very interesting space, this legacy financial system, and how it's being changed by all of these incumbents, being Stripe, PayPal, Square. But yeah, I think we can move on to diving straight into Stripe. So basically, Stripe, as we said, is the payment processor, the gateway that is facilitating the payment or the transfer of funds from the merchant, being the business that's taking the transaction, from the end customer, the end user, say the customer on Amazon's website. They are taking the funds from Amazon's website and giving that to the bank at a very simple level. And basically they're a financial services company, software as a service. They run a whole bunch of APIs, which are application programming interfaces, which allow these payments to work. And I think the most striking thing about is Stripe, that I noticed the first time I actually became aware of the company, I don't know about you, Jonty, is that how unassuming they are. And like, when you look at the amount of customers they service, I mean, basically every single name you should know on the list. I mean, they service Amazon, Shopify. Shopify is basically their biggest customer. Spotify, DoorDash, Postmates, like, all of
Google,
it, Google,
Microsoft,
Uber, yeah, all of the any of these,
Salesforce,
yeah, Salesforce, any
huge
of these
names.
any of these big tech online e-commerce marketplaces that are running sort of complicated payment interfaces, that's probably Stripe. And the thing with Stripe as well is that what I found is that they so seamlessly integrate into their customers sort of offering, their website, that you often don't even have to leave the merchant's website when you are making a payment. So for example, like on Amazon, Amazon's perfectly designed for that one-click checkout. You just click buy now, it has your card details saved with Stripe, um, and they just process your payment straight away. And the biggest selling point and how Stripe was sort of created was by the Collison brothers, John and Patrick Collison. They originally created it for developers. And Jonty, I don't know, like, this is such a big, straight into the strategy part of it, is that like they really picked out their niche audience and they created it for developers. They didn't create it sort of as this sort of complex integration that would have to, or that was just straight out the box and you were very constrained by them. They targeted towards any developer for any business who can actually take it and adjust it with a few lines of code. So they built this whole community about them. And basically, I think to this day, this is their biggest sort of differentiator still, from a strategic point of view. And it reminds me of yesterday. I was actually watching a video, completely unrelated. It was actually of John. Do you know the co-founder of Airbnb, Brian Chesky? And he was talking about doing things that don't scale, especially that are applied to Airbnb, and how they came about, how they would sort of go out and do and visit their hosts or their individual customers, doing things that don't scale. I feel like Stripe sort of did the same thing by sort of tailoring their product and creating a beautifully designed product for a tiny community, being developers. So say they had a tiny pool of 100 developers that just were completely obsessed with their product. Instead of trying to go to and try get 1 million people to like their product, you go and target 100 people. For example, you have 100 true fans that will, that are diehard. They'll recommend your product as the first, from the get-go.
You're saying like start with a product that's really good and with customers that are going to love that product, and you're not thinking about the general like population or how you can scale it. You're just like putting a great product out to a few amount of people,
Exactly.
and making it
Exactly.
work in that small area first before you
100%.
start branching out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I think that's the key in that, you don't create something for 1 billion people to like it. You make something for, my neighborhood to like. And I think in that, a lot of the scaling issues of that get solved, because you can solve easier problems and on a smaller scale before you think about taking it out. And I think once you've built a reputation like that, so basically with Stripe, they had this crazy community of developers that were in love with their product, and through that community, those were their biggest marketers, basically. In that community of developers would use Stripe for their companies, and they would recommend it to their friends who are also developers for their companies, and it sort of spreads like this. And yeah, I mean, they obviously starting with that core payments API, the core payments product, which allows you to process a payment on a website. But then, as we've seen, because they started in 2011.
2011.
Yeah, launched in 2010, 2011. And basically from there, with that core payments API, as they've scaled up, they've sort of created the suite of, like, Jonty, how many
Payment
products? It's like
stack. Yeah,
the
it's
payments.
crazy.
It's like 20
And
products actually.
but so this was an interesting point I was actually thinking about was, do you think they started out the business with, one day they're going to have 20 different products related to payments? Or do you think it was they entered a market and they had one idea in mind? Obviously, they just wanted to accept online payments. They saw like the internet's growing, online payments is growing. They had foresight to see that. Do you think they went in with that strategy of, we're just going to do, or we're going to do multiple products one day? Or do you think it was as they learnt about that space that they were in, they realized, hey, we can diversify our revenue streams. Hey, we can actually see, merchants need this done, which is, something like, I think it's, if you look at, is it Stripe Atlas and
Yeah.
Stripe Sigma, they probably learnt, along the way that merchants actually need these services that no one's filling. And so, for example, Stripe, I think it's Stripe Atlas, that now it basically gets rid of all the administrative burden of starting a company. They'll do your legal filings, getting your company registered. I mean, this is all value add to a merchant, and they're trying to they obviously saw, they want to differentiate themselves to other, say, payment gateways, and be able to offer as much value add to these merchants as possible, and the merchants are their customers. And so I think it's definitely something that they probably saw along the way, and they had the foresight and the understanding to, diversify these revenue streams, which I think is so cool. And I mean, the other one, which is Stripe Sigma, which is
Is that the
it offers
reporting?
data
That's the reporting
analytics.
tool. Yeah. Isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, they can get data on, products that do well, churn, merchant churn,
Yes. Yes.
churn being losing subscribers, etc. So they can get all these data analytics about the merchant's business and provide this information to the merchants, and data on their payments. What days are their best sales, what products are doing well. And so they obviously
And that
saw
and
these
that
value
data is
add.
coming from all of their other merchants that all of their customers that they actually, that they service. They've got
Hmm.
billions of data points that are coming from their other merchants that they service, and they're able then to sort of take that and work and analyze the data, gain insights, and create a whole product out of it. Addressing pain points. And Jonty, to go back to that point that you the main question you actually posed to me, I think going back to that's like basically tying in with the story about the Airbnb founder. I think they, and this goes back to the brilliance of these two guys. I mean, they are Patrick and John Collison. They're two of the youngest billionaires in the world, and they are highly, highly, highly intelligent. And they just know. I don't know. They just know, like, they know what's going on, right? I think what they started out with was because the story actually behind it is that they started a company that basically built on top of eBay to actually to help process payments from buying and transacting through eBay. And what they found through that experience was that it was incredibly hard to transact and process payments through the internet. You had this whole insane $1 trillion financial system, and you had the internet, which was this relatively new 15-year-old thing that was completely disrupting every single industry. But you couldn't, and where commerce was actually taking place over, but it was the most difficult thing to actually accept payments and process payments over the internet. So they realized this problem, and I think what they just basically did was like, here, we're going to solve this one problem. We're going to build an insanely effective, beautiful, sexy API that's going to allow us and other merchants just to process payments. And I think from there, everything snowballs. And once that starts getting going, that I think as they take on more merchants, they sort of discover, oh, there's this problem that this person's having based on this data we've gotten, and by talking to our customers, and so maybe we can help with this as well. And I think that's how you build out your. So I think it's a really important lesson for anyone, when you want to start your company, is in that you need to solely focus on one problem. And I think you would lack focus by going and starting a company and saying, I want to start with 20 products and sell all of them because I know that that's how I'm going to diversify my income. I think rather, if you look at all the successful companies and all the most successful startups, you start with one product that solves a problem for your
Or
customer.
didn't Amazon started with books?
They started with books, and that was it. They wanted to sell books over the internet. That was the problem they wanted to solve.
But I mean, so also I think they probably also saw these value add that they could offer. But I think also competition, it's I read somewhere that surprisingly there's low barriers to entry in this space. I think with rising technology, costs and the ability to enter is getting easier. And we're also seeing the space in the banking space with in South Africa here we got what's it, Discovery Bank, and what's that other bank, Bank Zero,
Time
Bank
as well.
Yeah, you're seeing all these these disruptors coming in because of technology. It's probably the same in the payment industry. And so you got
Well, you've got Square, you've got
such as
PayPal.
Square, PayPal, you've got Braintree. I think there's a few others,
Adyen,
and like Square
and
also offers a lot of value add services. I think they initially started as a point of sale system, so that's physical point of sale devices.
So there's slight
obviously
differentiators between all of these, right? And that's the interesting part, is like you say, Square's the point of sale.
But they've branched into online now as well.
Yes.
And so your competition grows, which then that also squeezes your ability to charge higher fees. You start potentially losing customers. I mean, if you're a merchant, the one thing you're going to be pretty set on is, can I get the lowest fees possible? But I think this is where we can speak a little bit more into some value add services on what Stripe does, because the security becomes, and the whole aspect of Stripe Radar, that radar service that they offer, becomes quite important. So radar is essentially machine learning. They use machine learning to be able to detect fraud. And so obviously with card not present payments, so online payments, the risk of fraud is extremely high. And so essentially what Stripe does is they actually take the liability away from the merchants. So they hold the card information. This doesn't have to be something that the merchants hold on their websites. So they don't have to worry about all the cybersecurity risks and fraud risks. Stripe takes on all of that, and on top of that, the machine learning system that they use in the Stripe Radar essentially can detect fraud better. And so what it does is it prevents more transactions being denied or not going through that could possibly be fraud, but actually aren't. And so that increases the ability of merchants to actually get more revenue, because
yes, I read this
without
as
that
well.
system. And so, I mean, this is again going back to value add, is as a merchant, you want to be able to accept as many payments as possible. You want to limit the obviously fraud and limit the number of transactions getting denied, so you can increase your revenue. Obviously, it lowers your liability risk. You don't have to worry about security. It takes all of that away. And another interesting one, which is Stripe has just bought Fast. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I saw that.
And
That
Fast,
isn't that single button checkout.
Yeah,
right?
so you don't have a shopping cart, and apparently shopping card or shopping abandonment. What's the exact word they use for all the
I think so.
shopping cart abandonment?
Basket abandonment or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly, and so essentially Fast would limit that abandonment, and then obviously increase sales, which is incredible. So this is another value add that they're going to add to the system.
So how does Fast actually work though? Do you know? Like, do you know how it actually, like, because I mean, does it?
I'm not too sure on the specifics.
Okay.
Yeah, but you essentially, you don't have to I don't think you have to put the payment information in. I think I don't know how it all works, but it's essentially, I mean, it's eliminating that shopping cart
Yeah.
experience, which I think
Oh,
is
that's
pretty
amazing.
cool.
And I mean, that's a key thing for working online is if you're starting a business online, you want to create as frictionless an experience as possible. And like you say, I mean, the less clicks a customer can take to buy something, to book something, to to book an Uber, to book an Airbnb, to whatever, to buy something on Amazon, the better and the more likely they are to get the sale, to make more money. And I think, yeah,
Mm.
like you're saying, this is what Stripe is doing for their merchants, and because of their machine learning, because of their data, um and to actually put a number to
More
that,
and more
Jonty,
value add.
I
Yeah.
yeah, I saw that they actually, because I actually got it next to me, that they built a machine learning engine, this is last year, to automatically optimize the bit fields of card network requests. Now I have no idea what those last 4 or 5 words, like what bit fields are. I think it's like what we were just talking about, is that like the ability for a card to get, like, to not to not get rejected because of uh the bank may think it was fraud, but it's actually not. But they estimated that it would give back $2.5 billion worth of like free revenue that was lost by their merchants just by
Sure.
building this little tool to help them. So yeah, it's crazy the amount, the scale they've gotten to, and the amount of this suite of products that they're
Yeah.
actually building
And I
out.
mean, on top of that, so it's also something that when we were learning about this whole system, um, when a merchant, so having a bank account where they have a business bank account, they still have to apply on top of that to actually be a merchant, have a merchant bank account,
Yes,
etc.
yes,
So
yes.
Stripe actually, going through Stripe, they essentially become a sub merchant of Stripe, and so they actually avoid that whole process, which is another administrative burden
Hmm.
taken away, which
Yeah, and
is
how's this? Hey, like I'm pretty sure if you sign up with Stripe as a merchant, you can launch your business in, like, what is it, like 2 to 3 days or something? Like you just have to submit your details, or I don't know what the
that's
turnaround
with
time
Atlas
exactly it
or
is.
what?
But I'm saying if you get their payments processing, if you sign up for their payment software, right? I'm pretty sure you have like instant access, or like very short turnaround time. Whereas I read, like, especially in the UK, um, if you want to apply to, say, like Barclays or Lloyd's, to banks in the UK to become, for a merchant account, to become a merchant under them, sometimes the application process can take like north of 6 months. And then you may actually
Hmm.
just get rejected, and then once you're in, there's like a massive termination fee, and it's really expensive, and there's all this paperwork that you have to file. So like you say, it's just a huge value add
Yeah.
for
So I mean,
merchants.
also reading up in the research, I mean, a lot of things. So obviously, the ease of admin is very important, but also transparent fees. And so
Yes, yes.
Stripe has very transparent fees. They're 2.9% plus 30 cents.
And that's
And then
it.
obviously they negotiate with larger players. So obviously with your Spotify's and your Amazons, there's probably different negotiated fees. So they probably take smaller percentages. Um,
Yeah. But I
but
actually
it's
read
all,
something.
yeah,
I read something interesting about that. Is that, because obviously, so the thing with Stripe, that another interesting with Stripe thing with Stripe is that so I think their target market, right? Their initial target market, like I said earlier, is we build payment processes for developers, but sort of their target market and their customer base actually encapsulates like small startups to all the way to large enterprises like Amazon. And apparently they have millions and millions of actually small businesses that run on their software. Um, and basically what I read is that actually, so they have that, the standard fee for the smaller businesses, and apparently they don't actually make a lot of money. Like they sometimes don't even make money on the big enterprises. The Shopify's, which is actually Shopify is their biggest customer. But where they make up for it is the layering on of their extra product and the millions of tiny customers that they have on the long tail. That's where they make up. Even though even though
So I
say
was going to
that,
say that
yeah,
they
yeah,
must have bigger margins on their retail clients
100%, 100%.
rather than the big institutional.
And the biggest thing with having Shopify as a customer of theirs, right, is that what makes it worth it for them is they get access to all the data. And what happens with that is once they get all that data, they can analyze it and build more products with these, get these bite-sized, find out these bite-sized problems that merchants are having and build products around that to, they can they can actually afford to work on these edge case problems and still make a lot of money and scale that up to their whole customer base. Like we've seen,
And
I mean, yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, Flip, this is strategy at its finest.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
What just comes to mind when I think of Stripe and their business and the prospects is just the tailwinds of online payments, online shopping. I mean, the growth in this industry over the next 10 years. I mean, I saw some stat, Flip, I don't want to quote another stat that I'm not 100% sure on, but I saw something like
I'll fact
2%
check
of
you.
payments, 2% of payments or something in the world, or is something like 2% is online. Some very low number, like the online payment penetration
globally, right?
globally. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So just think of that. I mean, and then you think of where Stripe is positioned, and you think of how much this is going to grow over the next few years, as like more nations develop, especially developing nations. I mean, even trends like in developing countries, like more is going online as we speak.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
and I mean,
COVID's accelerated that, hey? That change. I
exactly.
mean,
So,
yeah.
I mean, Stripe's a private company. We can't look at their revenue, but I mean, I imagine that in the last year, it's gone up hectically.
Yeah. I mean, I saw someone who was actually, I read an article, they did a deep dive on Stripe, which was actually really helpful. They were sort of estimating their Stripe's revenue. Let me see if I can quickly find it here. I think like basically they were estimating that Stripe could have earned, if you take a couple of metrics, they could have processed about 300 to 500. Or actually, I don't want to say this number because it seems too large. Like, is $300 billion
That could be the
like
gross payment volume.
It could, yes, true. So it's yes, that's true. So they could have processed 300 to 500 billion dollars worth of transactions.
Sure.
In 2020.
So then if you take 3% of that,
yeah,
what's that, like $15 billion?
Yeah, yeah. Look, you the maths
revenue.
whiz, eh? So you can do that off the top of your head. I have to bust out my calculator. But yeah, I mean, no, it's crazy. And that's only an estimate. Obviously, we don't know the true numbers. But yeah, I mean, if you go, you can also, I think they were going off Square and PayPal's numbers as well, which you can sort of take as a good proxy. And I would even go out and I would say that even Stripe could be performing better. And I mean, I've also got another stat here, Jonty, that says that the e-commerce share of total global retail sales for 2020 was only like 20%. So retail sales for 2020 was only like 20% of that was done online, which is a crazy number for growth. And like you say, the tailwinds, Stripe is just following that trend. And what they're positioning themselves as is what we've just been saying as like potentially the go-to company out of the box company where if I want to start my online e-commerce store, I'm going to Stripe and I'm using Stripe Atlas, and then I'm using their payments software, and then I'm using their Sigma product to detect fraud, and all of their
Atlas to start.
Yeah, and all of their other products, their suite of products.
And I mean, another interesting thing is they accept payments in 136 currencies apparently. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I saw that.
So I mean, that's also a value add there.
Yeah.
I mean, so many value adds.
Yeah, but okay, so that's interesting. So 100, is that 136 countries or currencies? Well, obviously then
Currencies, I think.
Currencies. So
or was it I'm pretty sure, was it currencies or countries? Now you've got me doubting myself.
Okay, well, I know this for sure is that I read that um they allow payments to be taken for their merchants from 135 countries. And what I mean by that is end customers in 135 different countries can uh, can make payments through through Stripe software. But this is the interesting part, is that their merchants only they only allow merchants to sign up with them in 40 different countries. So think about that disparity there, right? Is that, and this is actually one of their biggest risks, which is very few. I tried very hard to find a lot of risks that surround Stripe and sort of bear cases, if you will, for Stripe. This is one of the few. Is that the amount of countries that they are actually present in for merchants to sign up with them and become part of them is only 40 countries versus allowing 135 for customers to come and pay through them. So they have ground to make up in that.
So I just checked. It is 135 plus currencies. So I saw 136 somewhere.
Yeah,
so it's currencies.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. Sorry, continue.
Sorry. Good. It's good that we fact checking though.
Fact check, bro.
Yeah. So yeah, basically what I was saying is that like a big risk to Stripe is not having global coverage, especially if you think of places like Africa, Asia, India, China, especially, and obviously add the continent of Africa, three of them, the most up and coming places, and did it, like, wasn't it? I think we chatted about this last year as well, where like Africa was the next like $1 trillion market or something, or like basically the most one of the most
middle class.
Yeah, the most untapped customer base, basically. But I think also on the flip side of that, Stripe is solving that problem for themselves by, because I don't know if you saw they've invested in Paystack, that Nigerian payment processor. They also invested in a company called PayMongo, a Filipino payment processor. So they are definitely thinking about that, and they've made tactical acquisitions to sort of address that problem.
Yeah.
But I guess what you could argue, what they are up against is Jack Dorsey from, with Square, and he's a big advocate for Africa. I mean, I read today that he wanted to go. Did you hear this? That he wanted to go live there. He wanted to go live in Africa to learn about the culture and stuff. He wanted to go live there for like a year or two, but his board actually denied him. They actually said, like, you can't go.
Too dangerous or what?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Like, you'll be too distracted.
Well, imagine the growth in online payments over the next 10, 15, 20 years. I mean,
so Jonty, think about somewhere like South Africa, where, imagine if Stripe can, and I know there are already a couple of payment processors in like that are incumbent in South Africa. Think of like PayFast.
So our payment gateway is PayFast.
Is the main one is PayFast, right? But I mean, imagine Stripe coming into South Africa. Like, don't you think that they would heavily like intrude on the market share, that like whatever market share PayFast has, they would heavily take away, like given their brand, given their offering of services?
Yeah, so I mean, that's an interesting question. I wonder how they would disrupt. And I mean, if we think of, so we have Yoko here, which is more of a point of sale device, right? But they offer those value add services as well. I know I think they do financing now. They do the data analytics a bit. They have that whole like platform where you can analyze, your inventory, and there's like back office analysis, I think, as well. So I wonder, but Yoko doesn't offer an online service, does it?
No, I think they just point of sale here. Like they just have their
So
little
it
card
would be
reader.
only pay fast, if I understand
Yeah,
correctly. Then,
yeah.
as I mean, I don't know.
I
So
think there are a couple of others like very small. I remember looking at it when I was starting Conservice, looking at the different payment gateways, and there's a couple
so
of other
yeah,
ones.
I haven't
Yeah,
researched that much of the SA market, but it
yeah,
would be interesting. And a big thing for me is like, and for something like a big company like Stripe, is understanding the different regulatory environments. So I think that's also a challenge for such a big company that operates globally. And I think that's also the value add they give merchants, is that merchants don't have to worry about the regulatory issues and all the admin and requirements around that as well.
and also especially in an industry like this, the payments and sort of the financial services industry where it is highly regulated. You know, not that I know what exact regulations is, but I mean you're dealing with banks
I think we
and
have PASA here in South Africa,
yeah,
Payment
exactly, and
Association of South Africa. Yeah.
yeah, and remember also Stripe is also they've got Stripe Capital where they lend out, where they obviously lend capital to their merchants. Um, they've also got a potential banking as a service sort of new product coming out, which I want to touch on later as their future growth. Um, but I mean, there's a lot of regulatory coverage, and like one has to ask the question: are they maybe viewing Nigeria as their one big Africa play, or do they want to be in the whole of Africa? Maybe they just want to understand Nigeria, because isn't Nigeria is also the biggest economy of Africa, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So maybe I'm not. Obviously this is just a speculation, but maybe they're one big Africa play where they think it's going to be the most worth it for them is to capture Nigeria, get in there early, which is shown by their investment in Paystack.
So, yeah, the question I was thinking about is, you know, how much does it help the business if they have a more of a global offering? So if they operate in more countries, um, does that help them get more merchants on board? So, for example, for Amazon, um, if Stripe can offer them payments over more countries and in more currencies, does that obviously make them choose Stripe over, say, a Square, if Square doesn't offer that same range of countries to operate in? So you know I would think it's definitely another value add that they can offer. And so maybe getting into Africa, a lot of big merchants are probably also thinking about entering into that market. Does that mean that if Stripe's there as well and can offer the services there, does that help their business? And I'll definitely say that is another opportunity for them.
Definitely, I think so. Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, you got to also think about the sort of product offerings, right? So you mentioned Square versus Stripe, right? Square, I mean, Square, we know they have the small card reader, and they're targeting mostly small to medium sized businesses, whereas Stripe is mainly focused on online, on internet businesses, and will go from startup, tiny, to small business, to medium sized businesses, to enterprise. Um, so, I mean, you got to think as well. I mean, if they're coming into Africa, and maybe in the next 10 or 20 years we see a massive sort of African e-commerce giant arise, maybe the Alibaba equivalent. um Maybe you could argue Takealot is that of South Africa already. um Imagine Stripe starts getting some like Takealot as a client, uh, as a merchant, another massive Nigerian e-commerce store as a customer. First of all, I think, like you say, it's a big value add and increasing their customer base. Um, also, yeah, for the existing customers to then enter into different regions as well, to expand their own offering, allowing their merchants to then pop up in Africa as well. But I think also a big thing is the data, hey, Jonty, because then you're tapping into a whole new demographic of data, and they're going to start, and they can maybe create specific niched products for certain African people, based on their problems, which yeah, and this is a common theme of this episode, I think, which will be a big takeaway, is looking at the granular level, granular data, and picking out insights and problems that you can solve for your customers, which Stripe is doing. So I think that could be a huge thing moving into Africa.
I wonder. So I mean, just on South Africa, I wonder if it's probably not worthwhile for them. I mean, it's small market, already has pay fast. Like, I don't know what pay fast charges, but I wonder if it's the economics are worthwhile for them. Maybe that's like a place like Nigeria, as you say, probably much bigger economy, more room for growth. There's probably less competition there. I'm not too sure. This is just all assumptions, but yeah, they're probably looking at Africa. But I wonder if South Africa is on their list. And I wonder how hard it is to enter a market and to compete with already set players. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
I mean, maybe because remember, obviously, Stripe is at the scale that they are now. They're not just sort of solely focused on their payment processing API, and that's not their core product anymore. They do have different arms to their to the business now. So maybe we could see a scenario where they sort of come in with their, I don't know if they have a separate, I don't know if you know, I don't know if they have a separate Stripe like venture capital arm, but obviously where they put their investments into different, where they put their investments through. But maybe we'll just see an expansion through. What if they like acquire Takealot? What if they acquire Payfast, and that's their way into South Africa, through M&A, through strategic investments, like that. Maybe we can also, maybe they'll mainly push Stripe Atlas in South Africa, enabling, because I mean, listen, Jonty, look, think about how valuable that is to South Africans, to any to people, to the intelligent, business community that we have in South Africa, that maybe doesn't have the means or the facilities to go through all the admin, and having an enabler like Stripe, who can literally set up your business in I don't even know how long it takes, but pretty quickly, and then giving you a payments processing API to start your business, basically giving a company in a box, and the founders can just run with it. Imagine the opportunities you can unlock. And I think this also ties into their mission and their purpose, is increasing the GDP of the internet. And we know that in South Africa and the rest of Africa, the internet is something that still has to be used a lot more than the rest of the world to get value, to unlock value. So I think that's a really, I don't know, maybe we see that play out, but that would be really interesting, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, here's a little question. So what are some of the threats to pay a Stripe?
You're testing me. This is usually your forte, eh? The risks. You're usually the risk man.
Cryptocurrencies, eh? Bitcoin.
Well, are you saying that crypto is a risk, Tim? I would argue that it's a growth area.
So I saw Square, does something with Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. I didn't look too much into it.
So through the Cash App, I don't know if like they have this. It's sort of
I've heard of the Cash App, yeah.
I don't know if it's like a subsidiary of Square, but it's basically another sort of arm of their business where it's a peer-to-peer money transmitting network where I can, through the Cash App, send you dollars or send you euros or whatever, peer-to-peer. And then naturally, cryptocurrency is an addition to that being peer-to-peer. So through the Cash App, you can, and I don't think necessarily trade, but definitely buy and hold and transfer and sell crypto and Bitcoin.
do they take a fee
Yeah, they
on that
definitely take a
transfer?
processing fee for doing that, and I think that's mostly come from Jack Dorsey, because he's a big crypto enthusiast. He's a big believer in Bitcoin and what it's going to do for the for the global economy, for the financial services, well, for the financial ecosystem, and the global financial ecosystem. And I mentioned this to you the other day, Jonty, is that we should do a separate episode on crypto. So maybe we'll talk about it now, but because it does play in, but that's definitely deserves a deep dive of its own.
Mm.
Definitely the hot topic in the past few months. But yeah, I think why do you think, I'm actually interested. I'm going to throw that question back at you. Why do you think crypto is a threat to Stripe?
Yeah, I actually,
Just your thoughts, just random, like just random.
so I suppose if it bypasses that whole payment infrastructure and network that we spoke about earlier in being peer to peer, then, is there necessarily a need for, well, I suppose on an online system, you might actually always need a payment gateway.
Yeah, whether you
I'm actually
on
not,
whether you're on the blockchain or in the legacy financial system. This is the thing. This is what I'm thinking. Is that basically, I think my thing was, when I was thinking about it, is that they can use crypto, and not necessarily like Bitcoin, but like the blockchain as well, which is sort of runs sort of analogously with crypto. They could potentially utilize the blockchain for their own businesses, for their own business and their own payment processing, and sort of run their own payments network. I know I'm maybe getting a bit technical and like sort of outlandish here, but just bear with me here. Is that I was just thinking, I don't know, can they not create their own payments network through the blockchain? And so and say you have a scenario in the future where banks, the normal legacy institutional banks are using blockchain, a blockchain of their own, and are using like stable coins to sort of transmit money back and forth. Can Stripe not just be on their blockchain, and there's just a whole like one big blockchain that payments go through, and the fees lower, which is a value add for merchants. You could argue that Stripe's business maybe gets hit a bit because of the lower fees, if it does result in that, but maybe not, because of they could increase volumes. But I just think they could utilize that whole system and create the new financial system. And I've read I've read also that there are some speculations about that because their whole thing is that they're building infrastructure, they're building roads, not cars. They're building the roads between on the internet where money can be transmitted. And I guarantee you that they don't think the legacy financial system is the best that it can be. There's definitely a better way. There's definitely a better version of that. Obviously, and this is the whole debate with crypto, is that you can't just upend the whole financial system, because also people just too many people don't understand the whole space yet. And there's still so much that runs on the legacy financial system. So with that comes regulation, and it's going to be a long time frame. But I think there's definitely space for them to disrupt and use the blockchain, use crypto for this purpose.
interesting. I'm not as waxed as you on this stuff, but I mean, very interesting.
Also, another interesting point that I read is that the Collison brothers are big fans of Stellar, and for those crypto enthusiasts listening, is basically, I'm not too familiar with it though, but it is another one of it is another form of cryptocurrency similar to Bitcoin. But I think where they're different to Bitcoin, I'm just pulling up some info here on the side. they've branded themselves as an open network for storing and moving money. And going through the website, the Stellar website, and like all the info here is that it seems a lot. It's a lot like Stripe actually. They've basically got like open source, an open source API where people can build decentralized peer-to-peer, something like asset exchanges or a global payments app, multi-currency, even like a micropayment services. So like if you have a newsletter service, you can build this on top of Stellar and receive and transact with your customers. They even have on their website here designed for developers. So that's also something interesting that maybe Stripe could tap into. The Stellar, maybe they utilize the Stellar network and they take their whole business model decentralized. Maybe they run two separate arms of their business, one on the legacy financial system, one on the this on the blockchain, on a decentralized network. And maybe over time they take their business over from the legacy financial system.
Isn't PayPal now accepting Bitcoin?
Also, yeah.
Also,
so yeah.
Also a payment gateway. So
exactly. So if you're a user of PayPal, you can now buy and store and trade basically crypto. I don't know if it's I'm not sure if it's only Bitcoin, but basically, yeah. So you can do that now. So PayPal's also into that space, which is just showing where it's moving. So look, there's definitely a link. I mean, are you telling me that Square, because if Square and PayPal are in the space, that Stripe aren't going to be? I highly doubt it if we sort of see the things with crypto and blockchain especially play out in the future. I think they could definitely be in that space and be using it. Maybe also another thing is that allowing their merchants to imagine them, like PayPal or Square, tapping into the Bitcoin network and allowing Stripe, allowing their merchants to transact in and transfer peer-to-peer through the Stripe network, Bitcoin and Ethereum or other, maybe Bitcoin. That would be crazy as well. It's just there's a world of possibilities that I definitely that I definitely haven't covered all of them, and there are definitely people more intelligent and more clued up than me on crypto who will give you a better explanation.
My knowledge isn't also up to scratch on that topic, to be honest.
Yeah. Another big risk, I think, is, which can be easily remedied, and I've sort of talked about it, is their reliance on big customers like Shopify. Shopify being their biggest customer. If they lost Shopify, that's a big chunk of their revenue taken out and a lot of data that they would lose. So I think that is an obvious risk, but I think also where they more than make up for it is what I said earlier, is how they make up for it on the long tail. Another
just in that is, I wonder how sticky the product is. I wonder how easy it is to move from a Stripe to a Square.
Jonty, this is huge. So I'm so glad you actually brought up this point, because another big thing is that what I didn't realize until today actually is that like what Stripe does, it's so clever. What they do is, part of their offering is actually portability. So what they do is, say you are a merchant, you have a small e-commerce store, and you want to move from Stripe to Payfast or PayPal or whatever, Stripe to Square. Now Stripe will allow you to move, right? They actually are able. They actually have a service offering where they will make your data portable. They'll move everything over, no problem. But what they find is, and what I was reading about is, they found that customers who do want to move from Stripe have said, and because they, and usually the reason they want to move from Stripe is because maybe the fees are too expensive, which for a merchant, if you taking 3% of every transaction and plus a fixed fee, it equals it can actually add up to quite a bit, and it can strangle your business quite a bit. So I think there have been a few customers who have said in the past, it's too expensive, I want to move. Stripe will allow you to move. You can take everything, and whereas like PayPal actually is not portable. But what they found is with those same customers, they haven't ended up moving from Stripe because the brand and the service offering is actually so sticky. It's quite like counterintuitive, right? Is that like they offer this service, and it's almost like a value add, is that, if you want to leave us, we'll help you leave. But they don't, because what they do is so good, and like their service offering is so good, their products are so good. And it also makes me think about, I was listening to a podcast or watching a video a while ago, is like, it sort of reminds me of, if you are hiring people to work at your business, is that you should care as much about them when they arrive as when they leave. And that's, for me, that sort of reminds me of that, is that
good customer service.
Yeah, good customer service. You're creating a brand by doing that. And I think you're just creating a sticky product, the product being your brand, if that. And I think also a random thing before we close off is, did you know that Stripe has I don't know if you can call it a product, but it's a segment of their business called Stripe Press. Have you heard of this?
I don't think so, no.
So that they've like published a handful of books. Hey, how weird? How weird is that? Like, I found this today as well. It was like the weirdest thing that they've created this arm of their business that publishes sort of books for developers, sort of business books that are in their niche of payments, and I'm not 100% sure what they cover. But I know there's this one book that Patrick Collison, one of the co-founders, that he loves, and they actually like reinvented it into a new, republished it sort of through their own printing press. And I think this sort of ties it. I found it so interesting because it actually made me realize that Stripe, without really seeming like they're doing one of the biggest branding plays out there. Like I think they, without focusing so much on it, they are building one of the biggest brands out there by doing stuff like this. And it also filters into stuff like their internal communications with their employees, communications with their developers, their documentation, all beautifully written, very focused on content and creating content. So a growth opportunity I thought of is like, imagine you had like, imagine they created like a separate company within Stripe, which was like called Stripe Media, for example, which was basically like an original content production house where they like produce their own books, they publish their books, they produced like their own original podcast. They, I don't know, made documentaries there. You know what I mean? So like,
what value, like in what way do you think this could help the business? Is it for the brand, you're saying?
So I think it's brand, and what they could do is, what I thought of is that they could do it tailored towards taking all of their expertise and tailoring it towards a niche audience of small startups starting out, and it's the typical strategy of creating content around a product you want to sell so that you can acquire customers organically and create brand. So I think that could just be a really cool thing they could play around with, is like creating a podcast and like giving tips, because Square does it as well. I've read a few articles that like Square will write an article saying like top tips for starting your e-commerce business. And then obviously you on the Square website, Square blog, you have links to obviously, and then at the bottom they'll say like, get started with Square or something, right? Like it's all part of the funnel, and creating
All
content
part of
that
their marketing. And
marketing that adds value to people, and builds brand organically, and actually ends up. So I think that would be like super weird and super cool. I mean, it's
that's
so
quite
weird.
interesting. Yeah.
It's so weird that it almost draws attention to them, like Stripe Media or like Stripe Stripe Press. Like, why are they publishing books? Like, it's so weird that it like creates like hype and awareness about them. So I thought that was something really cool that they could maybe do in the
That's
future.
interesting.
Yeah. Any points from you, Jonty? Like, what do you think? What do you think they could do in the future?
I think they're doing pretty well. I think for me, the main focus for them should just be on maintaining a lot of good value add without losing focus of offering a easy to accept payment system online for merchants. And with the online market growing, I think they're positioned really well in the future. And I would want to, I suppose as they grow and they get bigger and bigger, it's easier for them to add services. But I would caution on the side of getting lost by adding too many services and not being really good at doing what they do.
Fair enough.
But the space will get more competitive, and I suppose that's why you're seeing them offer these new services. And people are always in the hunt for new business opportunities, new ways to make returns on capital. So I don't know, but I think they're positioned quite well at the moment. So I think it's a fantastic business, and I've enjoyed learning about them.
Definitely.
And I still feel I'm quite young in the learning of the learning process of this industry and this company specifically, but I definitely opened the door to look and understand this a lot better than I did before.
Yeah, well, I think doing this has definitely piqued my interest as well, and it's just like I always like, especially what we did with Spotify last time was also like just sort of lifting up the hood of this business and looking under, and how do things work, and seeing what moving parts is. It's really interesting, and also like, like you say, the payments industry is really cool, is really a cool space, and I love how it ties into crypto and what's going to happen there, which is super exciting. But yeah, I mean, just closing thoughts. I'd like to say thank you to everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed this. We hope you find them informative. Please let us know if you enjoy this format that we are trying, these strategy sessions. Let us know what companies you'd like us to do next.
Yeah.
That would be really cool. And I mean, till the next Mindshift, we'll see you soon.